Hi, so welcome back to another subjects video, and today we're going to be looking at teaching the subject of driving in towns and cities with your pupils. So there's a lot to cover. We're going to break it down and we're going to go through it. I've prepared a little sheet that will be in your workbook, so I want to be referring to that. And as always, there'll be some questions for you to answer to test your knowledge. And there'll be some links to other videos where I'll send you to some other links. So first question I just want to cover is, when do you cover this subject with your pupils? Do you do it quite early on, or do you leave it later? Well, basically it depends. It depends on where your pupil lives. It depends on their ability and their confidence, and when you feel it's right to introduce it. I would suggest quite strongly that you introduce this subject once they've got basic car control. So, they don't need to be perfect at it, but they do need to be able to, cope with a little bit of pressure, be able to get the car moving. If they do stall, that they can recover, and they're not still looking at their gears and struggling with steering. Don't take them into the city if they're struggling with basic car control, because this subject is going to really help them build on their awareness of their surroundings. It's going to help them with their anticipation skills of pedestrians, cyclists and all that kind of stuff, and their planning skills. So when you feel the time is right to introduce this, bring it in, and I would suggest bring it in quite early, but not extreme. There's levels of driving in towns or city. Introduce gently, gradually, so as they develop and become more confident, you can sort of put them into more challenging situations. So let's break it down. What is driving in a city or town? It's a big subject. How are we going to break it down? So it kind of consists of lots of mini little lessons that we'll be looking at. So what are we going to be looking at? Well, I've got the list here. So let's just run through the list. So we're going to break that down. So we're talking about pedestrians, i.e. being aware of pedestrians and anticipating what they're going to do, as well as pedestrian crossings, the rules around pedestrian crossings. How are they going to deal with them? So don't think of it just as pedestrian crossings. It's pedestrians, because pedestrians can cross anywhere, walk out behind a parked car, and your pupils need to be aware and ready for that. And of course, just knowing the different types of crossings and all the rules and stuff like that. So also on that sort of basis, we're thinking about buses and bus lanes and the rules around bus lanes, so their hours of operation, etc. We're thinking about cyclists and how much clearance they're going to need, and anticipating what they're going to do. We're thinking about cycle lanes, and has it got a solid line on the cycle lane? Has it got broken lines on the cycle lane? So we're looking at that. We're looking at typically one-way systems. You tend to get one-way systems in towns and cities, whereas your pupils might not have experienced that yet. So we're always good to get a one-way system, because they're going to deal with things differently. If they're emerging from a T-junction on a one-way street to turn right, how is that going to be different to how they position? Can they pass cars on the left? So get into that. Traffic lights, they may have done this already, so they should know the light sequence of traffic lights, but they're going to be dealing with yellow box junctions more often than not in cities, and maybe some things that they've not seen before. They're going to be looking at traffic calming measures, those shared spaces where pedestrians and cars share the same spaces, 20 zones. So if you've got any of those in your area, expose your pupil to them, get them used to them. Trams and Lrt systems. Now, unfortunately, in our area, we haven't got those. But if you were teaching someone in Nottingham, Glasgow, is it Glasgow or Edinburgh or both? Manchester, I believe, parts of London have got trams. So, if you've got them, teach your pupils them. Are they going to be going to an area? Are they going to university? I think Croydon has trams. Are they going down to university there? Maybe you can cover a theory lesson with them just so they know what they're doing. Okay, and also, driving in towns and cities, parking, where are they going to park in the cities? parking restrictions, multi-storey car parks. So basically what I'm trying to say is there's a lot, and you're not just going to cover this in one lesson. Yeah, introduce it gradually, progressively, raise the bar as they get into it. Okay, so yeah, so that's kind of really the scope of this subject. Let's just sort of move on to using a structure. So with all your lessons, you're thinking, how are you going to structure this to make it logical and flow and help facilitate learning? So use your ROMP structure. And in case you don't know what that means already, just to recap, it stands for doing a recap. What do they already know? So take pedestrian crossings. Okay, so your learner driver has been a pedestrian and has probably used all of the different types of pedestrian crossings. They might not be aware that they all have different names at this point, but they will be familiar and they've used them. So recap, take the knowledge they already know and build on it. Don't be careful not to patronise your pupils, sort of explaining the basics of what a zebra crossing is and what it looks like. So they'll probably tell you that, to be fair, but they might not know it quite to the rules and what it should be. So we're just making sure that we don't over-instruct them at this point, because they'll only switch off and get bored. So yeah, recap, find out what your pupils know about the topic that you're moving into. From that, set some objectives, set some goals to what do they want to achieve by the end of today. So it could be to identify the different types of pedestrian crossings, to feel more confident in approaching pedestrian crossings, and understanding the rules and what to do a little bit better. Okay, main points. So if you need a brief and if you need to go through those rules, if you need to go through the procedure, how you're going to approach them, things like that. But keep it short. As always, keep your briefings nice and short and to the point. Don't cover every single scenario before you get driving, because that's going to be boring. Give them the basics. Ask a few choice questions. For example, tell me the light sequence of traffic lights. Okay, so you could see those on pedestrian crossings. So tell me, what would you do if you saw the lights are on red, you've stopped, and then you see a solid amber light flashing on its own on a pedestrian crossing? What does that tell you? Now that they might not know. They might not be aware that that's a pelican crossing and the rules around those flashing ambers. So now you can fill in the gap in that knowledge, and there you've covered your main points. Most importantly, P, move on to your practice. Get them out there. And when you're out practicing, these scenarios are going to present themselves. So this is where you want to be proactive with your instruction to help them deal with those situations. Like, for example, making eye contact with a pedestrian that's about to cross the road, or potentially step out in front. Look at them. So this is the kind of the scenarios. Don't get bogged down in covering all scenarios before you dare drive out with your learner, because it's just going to be too much. Long briefing, not good. So get the basic points, get them out there, get them experiencing it. You're sat next to them to help them deal with the situations as they develop. That's really important. And of course, S at the end, the summary, to make sure that learning's taken place. What is your pupil taking away from this lesson? Have they achieved what they set out to achieve at the beginning? Hopefully they've exceeded expectation and they're very happy. This is where the value for money comes in. You want your pupils to be happy at the end of the lesson. So set some goals. What do they want to achieve? And hopefully by the end you've exceeded that. You've gone beyond what they thought they could have got done in that day, in that lesson. Okay, good. Mspsl routine. As always, we're always talking about the Mspsl routine. I just want to make sure that when you're dealing with these subjects that you are referring to your highway code and the rules around pedestrian crossings. And also, of course, driving instructor handbook. You want to be looking in DES. So there is a section on there on pedestrian crossings. So, and cyclists and all the things related to what we're talking about in here. So find the relevant bits. these books are packed with obviously rules and good advice to help your learners. So this is like your source document to give them all those really good nuggets of information. And of course, like I say, we're going to be using Mspsl Routine. So for example, dealing with pedestrian crossing. So the things I would be wanting my pupil to think about is, one, to get their eyes on full beam, look up the road and identify pedestrian crossings. I would want them to be telling me when they see a pedestrian crossing. If they're not seeing it, then I will gently prompt them and so we'll say, well, what type of crossing are we coming up to now? So we've prompted them because we can see it, but they haven't seen it yet. So we're training their eyes further ahead to start planning earlier. Once they've identified the pedestrian crossing, they're going to check their mirrors. What's going on behind? What is the relevance of checking those mirrors? Why do they do it? Do they understand why they're checking their mirrors on approach to a hazard? Because it is a hazard routine. So hopefully they know that, or if they don't, you fill in the gaps. Next, they check their mirrors. What would you be doing in a car if you were approaching any hazard or pedestrian crossing? Lift off your gas. Just ease up. You're not speeding up towards it. You're not trying to beat the lights on green or anything like that, or beat the pedestrian to the crossing. So you're just going to ease off the gas, not brake, but just ease off. And at that point, you're scanning and planning. So you're scanning left and right for any signs of pedestrians that might step out. So let's think about that again. So in terms of our routine, get the pupil to identify the pedestrian crossing nice and early. As soon as they've identified it, get them to check their mirrors, ease off the gas, start looking, scanning from side to side. Be prepared to stop if they need to. Then you can go into like, where would they stop? So yeah, let's get into that because I made some little notes on this. So thinking about how you're doing that. So you've dealt with the approach. They've identified the crossing. You're dealing with the routine, how they're going to approach that crossing. Then if they do need to stop, how are they going to stop safely? Where are they going to stop? What are the rules around where they stopping? Can they block pedestrian crossings, for example? Talk about the zigzag lines, what that means. Once they've stopped, they need to move off safely. So what could be coming up either sides in the blind spots when they move off from a pedestrian crossing? Encourage your pupils to be aware of this, and then naturally they're going to start looking to their shoulders to see if a pedestrian is crossing the road diagonally in their blind spot, because pedestrians don't cross in the designated spaces, do they? They'll try and rush the lights and try and nip in and get across the road. Cyclists, where are they going to be? So these are the things we want to be doing. So if they've stopped, how they move off safely. Do they need to secure the car? Are they securing the car there? So take the hazard of pedestrian crossings, break it down into those components and then teach that. Help them with it, and soon they'll be doing that on their own as a matter of routine. So that's why I put Mspsl Routine. Break it down, structure it, and learning will take place. The next thing I've put down there is routes. Getting good routes. You know, like if you're planning a lesson that's gonna, one of the goals is to deal with pedestrian crossings and one-way systems and yellow boxes, then make sure your route has that. So know your local area. Think of a route where these things will come, and then you brief based on what you know is going to be coming up. So you only talk to them about what is relevant to today's lesson, what is going to come up, what potentially is going to come up, rather than, you know, everything, a big long briefing, and then they only deal with parts of that. So like, for example, if you went in talking about a lot about cyclists and cycle lanes and all of that, and there were no cycle lanes, then, you know, try and manage the flow of information with your route planning. So I'm just going to go over to, I've got a little slide here. So here we're in Norwich. So let's just zoom out here. So Norwich City Centre. a good little route, just going around a one-way system here. Let's so this is Rose Lane, going up Rose Lane towards Castle Mouse. So the castle's there. So following the road round Market Avenue, coming down Prince of Wales Road, you've got lots of pedestrian crossings there. That would be really quite challenging for your pupil. As you come down Prince of Wales, you can get them turning right here and go around a shorter block, or they can continue down a little bit further and come round this way here. So you've got a bit of variation there, and the thing I would say is make it repetitive. So there's a lot in that little block. There's going to be yellow boxes, but lots of pedestrian crossings, cycle lanes, bus lanes. You know, it's got lots of stuff. It's a one-way system. So the first time round, guide them, keep them on the route till they start to feel they could do that on their own, and then start mixing it up. Start thinking about going to different places, being in different lanes. But I would just start with repetition, because we need the information to sink in. We need learning to take place. We need them to drive around that route that they feel they could do that on their own. So think about it at the end of the lesson when you're summing up. They think, do you know what? I drove in the city today and I did that on my own. I was dealing with the big boys. You know, I was driving in the city centre. So they get quite a good buzz out of that they were able to do that and cope with that. But if you just flit them around once, it's all a bit of a blur. And will anything happen? Will learning take place? So, that's why I say repetitious routes. Then start stretching them and introducing new things. Okay, so that would be a suggestion to use there. And just while I'm on that route, I've actually got, this is video I took yesterday, which I thought I'd just share with you. So let's have a little look at that. Just mute it because there'll be voices in there. So this is the route I just showed you on Google Maps. So as we're coming along, we've got pedestrians moving up, sets of lights. We just had a bus lane on the left side. We're in a 20 limit. And I'm just going to share with you a potential problem. So just as we're sitting here, we'd be proactively thinking, we've got pedestrian there. Here's that pedestrian we mentioned earlier. Make eye contact. Is she going to look? Is she going to step into that road? Where's she going? So, okay, eyes on the road. We're going down. We've got a set of lights here. And I am just going to pause it just for a second there. Oh, yeah. Okay, so lights on green, stop line. Okay. Now, I've, in the past, teaching real learners, I've had pupils come round here where these lights change and try and drive through that. On analysis and finding out why, for some reason they thought that there was a secondary light for the lights behind us. They didn't believe that the lights would be so close to each other, and for some reason in their head they thought they'd just keep going and ignore the red light. Okay, because we had talked about turning right at traffic lights before, and we had talked about secondary lights. So what did I learn from that is proactive Q&A, and sort of say, okay, so we're coming around here. If those lights were to change, where would you stop? Plant that seed in their mind. And then if they do change, then I think they would be thinking, I'm going to stop here. Okay. The other thing I just want to show you with this is really quite common. As they go through here, and I think it actually happens on this clip, the lights change. There are pedestrians there. Now, what is the likelihood that your pedestrian will see that set of lights there changing, see the pedestrians there and think, oh, I'd better stop? Think if you've got a car following closely behind. So there's the link with the use of mirrors, why we check mirrors before, so we're aware of what's going on behind us. And I would be, with my proactive Q&A here, is saying if the lights change here, we will continue to move through. We will not stop. So there's not a lot you can do if your pupil decides to stop harshly. You can't put your foot under the brake and hoik them off it and make the car move. The car will stop, so your risk of a rear end is quite high. If we did stop there, obviously we've committed an offence, we're on a yellow box. If we did stop there, this bus might now be moving through. So if the bus driver's not concentrating or not expecting us to stop, we could get hit in the sides. And if we dither, these pedestrians might think, oh great, the lights have changed, and they'll all start crossing. So we need to be prepared that what if these pedestrians do step out? What could we do? Use of horn, yeah, is a consideration. Eye contact, because here often pedestrians will look the wrong way. Think if someone's just got off the train station from Germany and they're used to cars being on the other side of the road. This is quite common where foreigners will look the wrong way when crossing the road and they could just step out in front of you. So just in this little snippet, how much talking have I just done? This is why I would say repetition. So be proactive. You can't pull them up and stop and explain this, but if you keep going around, say, remember what happened last time? So if the lights change, we all keep going through. Maybe we could consider the use of a horn. Make eye contact with these pedestrians. We're not going to stop because look, we've got a bus there. And if you do it a few times, those messages will start to land and then you hand over responsibility. So they come round here on their third or fourth time and they're like, yeah, no, I've got this. I have got this. I know what to do. If we did it once, it's all a blur. And have they really learned that? Have they understood it? So this is what I mean by proactive Q&A. And then what are we going to do here? Are we going to move over? We've got more pedestrian crossings. We've got a cycle lane. See that? Are they going to be checking their mirrors, blind spot, before changing lane? Have the pedestrian crossings been triggered? There is so much to cover in just that small section of footage. And while we're here, let's show you the other one. Let's show another one. So this is a little bit further. So I just come on a little bit further and let's just rewind that a second. So again, things you can start introducing. I'd like you to take the next available road on the right. This question will test them on their awareness of signs. So we have a no right turn. I'd like you to take the next available road on the right. It's going to be signposted for Rose Lane car park. I wouldn't do this on the first time, but gradually introduce this stuff so that they can start to learn and think right. You know, because their sat-nav might say turn right one day. And what are they going to do? Potentially, what are they going to do? They're going to go down there. Now, the way they've designed the road is to make that very difficult. But I'm sure you've all seen people try and do those kinds of things. So just things to be thinking of. In amongst this, we've got the pedestrian crossings. Now we've got the taxi turning right in front. And now just pause it here. Pedestrian waiting to cross the road. We come round here. Taxi's stopped in front of the pedestrian. Here's our Rose Lane car park. As we come round here, let's just see what happens. So here what we've done is we've got the windows down. We rolled the windows down before starting and we've just held back here off from the give way lines. And at this point, the learner is making eye contact with that pedestrian. Because the pedestrian is looking at us thinking, who goes here? Who's got the priority? So we've had the conversation that we are behind give way lines. By us sitting back, we're not going to encourage her to cross the road. We're not going to wave her across the road, but make eye contact and let her make her own mind up. Bearing in mind, she's just waited there for the taxi. She wants to cross. Now, arguably, there are better places to cross than this. She's stood in a cycle lane to try and cross the road. And see what happens. So we're waiting. We've made eye contact. Now, look at the lady in blue ahead. We start to go. Okay, so we've started to move. The lady in blue's taken a check over her shoulder. And look what happens now. And that she has a perception, is it? Pedestrian steps into the road as we've gone. Just rewind for those of you who are really switched on. Because just like watching this, how much time have we been talking about this? Look at the blue sign here. Look both ways for pedestrians. Look both ways. This is a sign for us. Look where it's pointing. It's pointing for us. So as we come round, look both ways. Think. This is an accident hotspot for the reasons we've just shown. Because what people will do, drivers will just look to the left from where the bus is coming from. They will not be looking to the right for pedestrians who have just stepped in the road. And also, what have we just learned from this clip? We need to look to the right and ahead. So could we have done a better job here? Yes, we could have done. This was a role play exercise. I was driving. I was with a PDI role playing. We were having the conversations about the lady to the right. And at this point, it was like, oh, stop. Look, pedestrians stepped out. We made eye contact. We went round. And, you know, it caught us out. Let's be honest. It caught us out. So this just shows you what's going on. Lots going on in this road. Got a cycle lane with a solid line. Coming up to this junction, we know that this is a new road layout and priorities have changed. And what we can anticipate is here, cars or vans coming out from here, often not going to be prepared to give way and will just pull out in front of you. So we're slowing, we're in eye contact, we're proceeding up the road. Okay. There. So how busy was that? So this is why we want to do it several times and hand over responsibility. And every time you do that, something different will happen. There'll be a different scenario with a car door opening, a cyclist looking to cross the road, etc. So plenty going on with that. So let's just get rid of that one now. Okay, so think about routes. I've just got some more slides up here, just thinking about your local area. So this is in Norwich near the football grounds. So this is a good little spot to bring pupils for a one-way system and pedestrian crossing. So we've got a pedestrian crossing with an island, a three-way. Often pupils will come down here looking to come round to the right, and we'll often ask if there's cars coming round here and round here, who's got priority? Well, there's giveaway lines, but they're giveaway lines for the pedestrian crossing, so no one has priority here. I would suggest we go round in our lane, they come round in their lane, and then once the lines break there, then if we need to change lane, we can cross. But we need to anticipate that cars coming around here might just go straight over into our path. So very good one to look at and practice with your learners. This pedestrian crossing here is, just to sort of show you, this is Brackendale. Ruin Road is just going down there. And this is one of the few remaining pelican crossings left in Norwich. So they're a dying breed. You're not going to see too many pelican crossings. So these are the ones with the flash and amber. So if you want to expose your pupil to flash and amber sequences and knowing what to do, what the rules are around those, this video is not about the rules. You should know that. If you don't know that, go look it up and make sure you teach your pupils what's what. So so this is a good example where you will get a flash and amber pedestrian crossing. What will they do on flash and amber? Will they wait when the pedestrians are stood on the footpath? Are they going to hesitate? Are they what? Yeah. So this is what we want to cover and get them doing it. Other things we can just look at. So this is a good one, St Andrews in the city centre. So that's St Andrews Hall. Just sort of get a feel for where you are. Cinema City. So this pedestrian crossing near a college, the art college is near here. This is always busy. How are they going to deal with that? Can they go through if pedestrians' feet are still on the crossing? Do they need to wait for the whole crossing to be clear? This is a very difficult one to do that. Are they going to be hesitant? You know, are there gaps that they could have taken? It's a bit like taking gaps at a roundabout. So you need to be looking at the flow of pedestrians, looking for your gaps and making sure there is not a foot on the pedestrian crossing. Good, that's a really good one to do that. This is used quite a lot in part 2 tests because it's quite challenging. This one here, this is in Tombland in Norwich City Centre. This is taken when it was a flash and amber sequence. So here we've got pedestrians waiting either side, flash and amber sequence. What do we do? Can we go through? What's the score? Just so you know, this one is no longer a pelican crossing. They've upgraded this to a puffin crossing. Okay, so they're all disappearing. All the pelicans are gradually going to turn into puffins. So moving over, bus lanes. We're thinking about where can we go for bus lanes. So again, look, think about your local area where you can go. This bus lane's got a time restriction. So what are the rules around that? Should they use the bus lane outside of these hours or not? You know, these are the conversations you want to be having with your pupils. Equestrian crossing. So often people say, oh, there's no equestrian crossings in Norwich. You'll have to go to Newmarket for something like that. But no, here in Drayton on the Fakenham Road, we've got one. So we've got the high buttons for the horses, the little area for horses to wait in, and the separated path for them to cross. We've got a bridleway coming through here. The horses will cross there. The pedestrians and the cyclists will cross there with the low buttons. Okay, so that's that one. So we have got one. There are more off the slip roads, off the A47. Coming down the slip roads, there's bridleways that cross those as well. This is quite good. This is Old Palace Road in Norwich, pedestrian zebra crossing with an island. How do we distinguish this as an island? Because we've got the light in the middle. Think about nighttime driving, looking ahead, three Belisha beacons. Oh, we got an island on this one. This is how they do it. So this is what we want to be thinking of. How's your pupil going to treat this? Is it one crossing? Is it two crossings? These are the things you want to cover. Just note here also how they've chopped the tree down for visibility. This is why you can't park on zigzags, because you will block the view of pedestrians being able to cross the road. Also, just cover other things, like let's say there was a queue of traffic coming along here, so it's all queued up bumper to bumper, and they've left the crossing clear, and we're driving through here. We cannot see if a pedestrian is on this crossing. So how would we drive through this? We would drive through it like a closed junction. Brake, rolling first gear, clutch down, leaning, looking, prepared to stop. Lots of people fail their tests for this when there's queuing traffic, driving through at a speed that they could not stop within the distance seen to be clear. If there was a pedestrian there, they'd kill them or seriously injure them. And this is where examiners will intervene and not let you do it. So you might not get it on the day you're doing this lesson with your pupils. So this is where you need to talk about the what ifs. What would you do if? Parallel crossing. Does anyone know about parallel crossing? So look in the essential skills. It's in there. So this is a parallel crossing where you've got a zebra crossing shared with a cycle path, and there's our cycle path going through. So this is a parallel crossing. Yeah, I think I'll leave that. That's a few examples in Norwich. Go back to here. So, how long have I been talking? 33 minutes. Right, we're nearly there. Going to wrap this one up soon. Okay, so we've talked about routes and repetition. We've talked about in town, windows down, make eye contact, hearing as well. Think about your listening skills in city centres. You get the windows down because you can see through the glare of windscreens. Make that eye contact. With the pedestrian earlier, we had the windows down. We could make eye contact. That's how you do it. You're more likely to be let out into traffic. If you're waiting to emerge and you've got your windows down and you make eye contact, someone's more likely to let you in to the flow of traffic. So, common faults. We're going to refer to... Got a document here. This is really good. If you just Google understanding your driving test, the DVSA have just knocked out this new website. 21st of April this come out, and they've just updated it 4th of August, and I'm filming this on the 11th of August. So really good. So take a subject on the DL25. So we're looking at pedestrian crossings. Open that. So they're listing some of the common faults. So this is what the examiners see day in, day out. So let's just review what we've got here. Let's just pop that up a little bit bigger there. Okay, so examples of faults. Stopping on a crossing, blocking it. Moving off before a pedestrian has completely cleared the crossing. So they might be walking away from the pedestrian. They're not quite on the footpath, but they go through. There was no islands on this zebra crossing. Fault. Okay, approaching crossing too fast. So maybe they've not seen it. They've not checked their mirrors. They're not treating it as a pedestrian crossing, or the example I used earlier where there's queuing traffic, where they need to be slowing down, anticipating there is a pedestrian that they can't yet see is on the crossing and they're approaching that just too fast and they couldn't stop. Failing to stop at a crossing, the one I mentioned earlier in the city where it could be confused when I thought that was a secondary light. I didn't think that was for me, or I just didn't notice it. So there's some of the faults that you could encounter, and how could you improve this area? So this is something you could send your pupils to this website, especially if they failed a test, where to look. So we've got the specific rules in the highway code, and read the specific pages in DES driving the essential skills for the 2020 edition, so pages 184 to 188. So these are the things you should be looking at in preparation for planning your lessons on driving in the city. Okay, so we could deal with common faults. Think of it as IAR. So if you start anticipating the faults, so identify faults, think how you would analyse those faults, the kinds of questions you would ask to get to the bottom of that fault, and what remedial action will you put in place to fix those. So start building up a list of, this is what I'm anticipating as a fault, this is how I would analyse that fault, this is how I would fix that fault. This is what you should be doing to prepare for these lessons, because when I'm in role, or when you've got a real live pupil doing this, I think you'll be surprised just how many faults there are and the reasons behind it. So start thinking about that now and preparing yourself for it. Just finally, level of instruction. I said earlier, we don't want to over instruct. You know, this person has got car control. They know stuff about pedestrian crossings. They've probably been a cyclist as well, so they know stuff. So try not to patronise them. Try not to teach them how to suck eggs, but definitely you need to offer the level of help, that proactive Q&A, to prevent them making those silly mistakes, to start planting the seed in their head, prompting them, what are you thinking here? What would you do if? Where would you stop? And go through it like that. Okay, so that really now concludes that. So there will be some questions, so move on to the questions, answer those, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.